Hey y'all, it's Becky here from the Beccasphere, where we talk about climate news and solutions. You have entered a climate recap where we take a look at what is being done to reduce the impacts of and prepare for climate change. This time we will be looking at news from November 7th to the 20th. The first half of this takes place but is outside of the second week of COP26. If you want to know what happened during the actual conference itself, I just published a video on that, so you can take a look at that. Should be up there, one of them, but after this video. And if you'd like to stay up to date with the latest information on one of the most important topics ever, please consider hitting that subscribe button below. Now, before I get started, we have a new sponsor, yay! And it is Earth Hero. Earth Hero is the one-stop shop for everything sustainable, offering thousands of trusted eco-friendly products from over 250 ethical brands like 4Ocean, Beeswrap, David's, Decomposition, Drops, Elite Cosmetics, Meow Meow Tweet, Pellicase, Plain Products, Dasher, Tentree, and TerraCycle. I love all those products. Everything they sell on their site is made better for people and the planet. From zero-waste living products to sustainable clothing, accessories, and tech, Earth Hero aims to have an eco-friendly alternative to anything and everything you need to purchase. Plus, they're a B Corporation, 1% for the Planet member, carbon neutral certified, and Carbon Fund partner. I have gotten many products from them, including produce bags, a cold brew kit, some cute little coasters, some dish soap, and I've loved everything. And Rue has also loved the packaging, so I feel like I got a free plastic-free cat toy out of it too. Plus, when you click on an item, you can see what each company supports, which is a really cool feature. So this holiday season, get your friends and family quality items from Earth Hero and use the promo code PLANTTREES to get 15% off site-wide and plant 5 trees per order. I also have an affiliate link that I will paste down below in the description box if you want to give me a little bit of money while you shop. Right now, they only ship in the US. Sorry, my international folks, but they're working on shipping internationally soon. Thank you so much, Earth Hero, for supporting my work. And thank you to you, my viewer in the Beccasphere, because without you, I would not be doing this. Okay, so let's talk about the climate news, starting with the US Energy Department, which is aiming to significantly drop the price of carbon capture technology with the goal of reducing it to $100 per ton by 2030. Right now, it's closer to $2,000 per ton, so that's a big drop. Oklahoma is proposing letting its biggest gas utility company, Oklahoma Natural Gas, charge users $1,400 exit fees. This is the most recent example of gas companies making it harder for people to switch from gas to electric, which is a relatively simple way for people to significantly decrease their carbon footprints. Meanwhile, in Louisiana, the oil and gas industry is pushing misinformation about its impact on climate change and instead trying to convince residents that the royalties paid by offshore drilling in the Gulf of Mexico is actually keeping Louisiana from losing more land to the sea because it's going towards coastal restoration. In reality, oil and gas drilling and spilling has harmed the local wetlands, and the money for storm buffering wetlands and barrier islands actually mostly comes from oil spill settlements. And the state is receiving less royalty money from offshore drilling projects than they expected. Yet the Louisiana's congressional delegation hasn't bothered to petition fossil fuel companies for more, and is instead asking the federal government for more money, which Congress has not signed on to do. The Biden administration is now auctioning off more of the Gulf to fossil fuel projects after Republican attorney generals sued the administration because they were originally not going to do that anymore. Exxon and Shell offered $192 million in winning bids for leases. In Virginia, the midterm election turned the state red, but luckily the state's clean energy law will make it hard to derail due to the blue state Senate. A new analysis by Environmental Defense Canada and Oil Change International found that Canada's 8 oil and gas producers do not line up with Canada's climate goals at all. The analysis was conducted with the help of more than a dozen other environmental groups and found that all the climate pledges by fossil fuel companies are heavily reliant on carbon capture technology and ignoring Scope 3 emissions, which are produced as a byproduct of making heat, heating homes, and powering vehicles. Scope 3 emissions represent 70 to 80% of Canada's fossil fuel industry emissions. So by omitting that part, they're emitting like almost all of it. Quote, "The takeaway is these plans shouldn't be given any credibility by anyone, especially governments." Also in Canada, a doctor diagnosed a patient as suffering with climate change after they came in with breathing problems during the wildfire season. The patient has had a history of health problems, including diabetes and heart failure, and their condition was worsened by heat and smoke. Quote, "If we're not looking at the underlying cause and we're just treating the symptoms, we're just going to keep falling further and further behind." A study published in the Environmental Research Letters found that an annual drop in global aviation travel by 2.5% could reduce air travel enough to stabilize how much heating it adds to just 0.04%, which is what it's contributing now. If air travel continues to increase like it's slated to do, it could contribute to about 0.1% of the warming. So that's a big difference. Meanwhile, another study found that luxury carbon consumption of the top 1% will account for 16% of global emissions by 2030. Cacama indigenous women in Peru are suing the government to recognize and grant legal rights of nature to the Marañón River. The river is downstream of Lot 1AB, an oil field carved into the Amazon rainforest with nearly 2,000 contaminated sites. Meanwhile, another coalition of indigenous women called the National Organization of Indigenous, Andean, and Amazonian Women of Peru is lobbying for the government to recognize the rights of nature in national legislation. The rights of nature legislation, judicial hearings, and congressional amendments have started to emerge more often around the world, like in Canada, Mexico, Colombia, Bangladesh, Bolivia, India, New Zealand, Ecuador, and Uganda. A new Global Initiatives Against Transnational Organized Crime report found that trafficking of plastic waste is on the rise and connected to organized crime. The criminals help ship the plastic overseas to developing countries who have said that they would not accept it. California is actually the worst offending state in the US for exporting plastic pollution. A third of all plastic exported from the US comes from California, and it is the main source of banned plastic exports in Malaysia. This could be because California has too few recycling plants for its size, and it has the Los Angeles port, which is the main port that ships from the US to Asia. In other recycling news, the EPA finalized their first national recycling strategy on National Recycling Day, which was November 15th. I had no idea that there had never been a national recycling plan, but I guess I'm glad there's one now. In 2021, as shown in my previous news point, we are definitely in need of improving the national recycling infrastructure. The strategy aims to achieve 50% recycling rate by 2030. The plan is paid for by the infrastructure bill, which allocated $350 million to recycling and solid waste grants. I recently made a video on the infrastructure bill if you want to take a look and learn more about what other climate provisions are in that one. The EPA plans to look at plastic products throughout its whole life cycle and a circular economy approach. It will be interesting to see how the recycling industry will change over the coming years from this. A new database shows hundreds of contaminants detected in US tap water. And I know this might not necessarily have to do specifically with climate but I think from a public health perspective, I should probably tell my fellow Americans this. Because I looked up my water and it said that I have 37 contaminants in my water, 15 of which are above the environmental work group's recommended levels, which is technically not illegal, but it's also not safe. And I thought my water here was actually pretty good. So most of these increase my risk of cancer. So try your zip code if you're a US citizen in that link in the source section below, and let me know what you got. Cancer has quadrupled in the last decade through a Serbian town after the Chinese-owned steel mill Heasteel coated the town in red dust. The plant has denied the increase in cancer is caused by the plant and said the pollution from the plant will drop by next year. But yikes. An AP analysis found that the risk of extreme heat has tripled globally since 1983, making a quarter of the human population at risk. The Protect Thacker Pass campaign, made up of tribes, farmers, ranchers, and activists, is attempting to block the construction of the largest lithium mine in the US. The campaigners say the repercussions of building the mine will outweigh the benefits of the mine's lithium towards the transition, and are worried that mining lithium will yield the same environmental care as the gold rush did. Apparently, lithium is called white gold. Proponents of the mine maintain that it will help address climate change and empower the domestic clean energy economy. Where do you stand on this issue? Because I'm honestly quite split and just hoping for us getting serious on developing a closed loop system for EV batteries. The US Court of Appeals voided an emissions rule put on heavy-duty truck trailers by the EPA and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. The rule, enacted in 2016, required manufacturers to adapt fuel-saving tech like side skirts and automatic tire pressure systems. An industry group challenged this rule, and now the court has said that it oversteps the authority of the administrations because it could allow them to go further into regulating other vehicle attachments. A $1 billion transmission project called the New England Clean Energy Connect, meant to provide hydropower to the people of Maine, was voted against by citizens who didn't want the high-power transmission line down that path. It would have provided crucial clean energy infrastructure to that part of the grid, though. Developers are convinced that they will find a way to continue the project. The Catholic Church launched the Laudato Si action platform, designed for any Catholic institution to enroll in a multi-year Vatican-backed process towards sustainability. More than 4,000 church organizers and bodies, including Catholic universities, have signed up for this ambitious initiative meant to put nature in the center of their focus. The program is based on the Pope's 2015 encyclical called Laudato Si, on care for our common home. Biden's a devout Catholic, so I'm always interested to see how moves like this will impact the White House. Or the, Stephen Colbert show, because he's also Catholic. And it was also cool to see that the National Catholic Reporter has an Earthbeat. Methane gas prices soared last week in Europe after Germany suspended certification of Russia's controversial new gas pipeline Nord Stream 2. I did a whole video covering the energy crisis, so if that sentence did not make sense to you, I recommend checking out that video. The world's largest PR firm, Edelman, has gotten a lot of flack lately from environmental activists for its role in promoting fossil fuel messaging. On September 15th, it unveiled new principles and plans and hired new people to make climate change the bedrock focus of the company. One person they hired that adds credibility to the push is Robert Casamento, who was the founding director of the World Economic Forum's Global Climate Initiatives. Edelman announced that they are conducting a 60-day review of their portfolio to formalize a clear criteria for climate communications, and they started the Edelman Impact to direct its environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, efforts and sustainability offerings. They're also, though, saying that they're proud of their big oil relationships, which, okay, but they did say that after the 60-day review, if they find that certain clients don't line up with Edelman's new values, they will, quote, withdraw from the relationships. So I guess we're just going to have to wait and see what the results of that will be. It could be a really big deal if they actually do that and start working for sustainable companies. The White House hosted its first Tribal Nations Summit in 5 years. This 2-day virtual event encouraged tribal leaders from 574 federally recognized tribes to discuss how the federal government could invest in and help strengthen nation-to-nation relationships and progress in Indian country. They discussed the need to respect sacred sites, and Biden signed an executive order called Improving Public Safety and Criminal Justice for Native Americans and Addressing the Crisis of Missing and Murdered Indigenous People to beef up efforts for missing and murdered Indigenous people, mainly women, which is a tragic and long overlooked epidemic. The second day of the event discussed education on reserves and how best to maintain native languages, which are slowly disappearing. This was the same day that Biden signed the infrastructure bill into law, which allocates $11 billion to native communities. First heat waves and fires, now flooding and mudslides. Canada and the U.S.'s Pacific Northwest has seen it all now, after 275 people had to be rescued from a mudslide. The area is experiencing flooding and power outages that have forced schools and businesses to shut down. These floods are caused by an atmospheric river dumping rain on droughted grounds. Part of British Columbia has declared a state of emergency after the huge storm hit, killing a few people and thousands of farm animals. Quote, "We were super hot and dry in the summer, and the switch flips. It definitely matches what the climate models show for the future around here. Hotter, drier summers and wetter winters. Our infrastructure isn't designed for that." In New Delhi, air pollution has gotten so bad that officials had to call for a lockdown of the city last week, or 2 weeks ago, but I think it's still happening. The air pollution rate there is 4 times the safe amount. This is relatively common during the winters when industry and vehicle emissions mix with smoke from crop burning. But let's be clear that crop burning only accounts for 10% of the pollution. They are a coal-heavy economy, and so that's the main reason why, and thus they have temporarily closed 5 coal plants around New Delhi to curb pollution. Memphis, Tennessee residents are pushing back on a proposed coal ash storage facility that the Tennessee Valley Authority wants to put in South Memphis. These facilities have a bad habit of leaking into groundwater, contaminating it with arsenic, and the TVA has a bad habit of putting this kind of infrastructure near low-income Black communities, particularly without any input from community residents. Allegedly. Israel, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates signed a deal organized by the U.S. climate envoy John Kerry to build a massive solar farm in the Jordanian desert. In exchange, Israel will supply desalinated water because their plant is closer to Jordan's populous epicenters. This was the biggest deal ever made between Israel and its neighbors. The Saudis tried to pressure the UAE to stop the deal because they said it undermines the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's plan to lead the region on climate with his Green Middle East vision. But after some cosmetic changes to the agreement, I think it might actually stick. TerraPower, founded by Bill Gates, announced it will replace a Wyoming coal plant with a $4 billion nuclear plant called the Natrium Reactor. About half of the project will be funded by the U.S. government, including $1.5 billion from the infrastructure bill. The coal plant is set to close in 2025, with the new nuclear plant being up and running by 2028. It's expected to power 400,000 homes. A new International Energy Agency report finds that global energy efficiency in buildings, transportation, and industry is lagging behind where it needs to be, and it has to triple by 2030 to match their climate-friendly plan. More people are taking aim at toxic pesticides. 26 of the top 40 pesticides are possible known carcinogens, and 24 have the potential to disrupt the endocrine system, among other impacts such as environmental ones, like when it gets into the water and it creates toxic algal blooms, or just the environmental disruption that it causes, and the fact that it's from a petrochemical site, which means that it's also contributing to emissions from petrochemical companies. The EPA has so far failed to properly regulate these chemicals, so 190 communities around the US are passing pesticide reform laws requiring the areas to use USDA certified organic products instead. There's still major hurdles being made by pesticide companies, though, to block this effort. People are also pushing back against PFAS, known as forever chemicals, which can be found in fire retardants. They are in our soil and groundwater and impact human health. North Carolina's Attorney General is suing 14 different flame retardant companies for using those chemicals. U.S. Midwest tribes have been awarded $6.6 million to build their own EV charging network. It should be enough money to pay for about 120 charging stations and 52 outreach events to encourage EV adoption. This provides a different option than fighting another fossil fuel pipeline. The work is expected to start next year. There's a new Netflix movie coming to theaters that screams climate change reality called Don't Look Up. Starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, Meryl Streep, and a slew of other stars, the comedy is about two astronomers warning the US government and the world of a planet-killing asteroid coming, and they're just not taken seriously at all. It portrays the feeling that climate scientists know all too well. Quote, "The idea that politicians wouldn't take astronomers seriously when they say a comet is hurtling towards Earth is ridiculous. So why isn't it just as ridiculous for politicians to ignore decades of climate science?" Quote, "Making such a difficult thing to talk about like climate change lighthearted and funny, pointing out the embarrassing truths in all of us. It leaves this blameless place where we can actually look at an issue and laugh at it instead of pointing fingers at each other." The movie will be in US theaters December 10th and available on Netflix December 24th. I am definitely going to see it. China seems to be loving coal, especially right now, but a government researcher expects their cement, steel, power, and coal chemical industries will peak in coal use around 2024. Right now, 86% of these sectors' energy supply comes from coal. Beijing's goal is to peak emissions by 2030 to be net zero by 2060, and this involves phasing down coal use by 2026. But hey, 2024 would be better. President Biden is calling upon the Federal Trade Commission to launch an investigation into oil and gas companies to see if any anti-consumer behavior has resulted in the rising gas prices. Quote, "The bottom line is this. Gasoline prices at the pump remain high even though oil and gas companies' costs are declining. The Federal Trade Commission has authority to consider whether illegal conduct is costing families at the pump. I believe you should do so immediately." I will keep you posted. Turns out the National Hockey League, or NHL's green program, might be greenwashed. A new report found that their partnership with the chemical company Chemours means that they promote Opteon, a group of climate warming refrigerants. They could be using ammonia instead, which doesn't contribute to climate change and is already used by many other rinks, but instead they're using Opteon. So that doesn't look good. Fossil fuel companies and many other countries want biofuels to be the answer to that pesky climate change problem. But it seems like we're just finding more reasons to not be a fan. Brazil's sugar-based fuel ethanol has now been linked to labor abuse, underpaying their workers for slave labor level work, and even employing children and what are considered slaves. Many workers suffer from extreme dehydration and starvation, and this is all coming from Brazil, which is the second largest producer of ethanol in the world. Canada is allowing the Coastal GasLink to continue construction despite the project being against Supreme Court and Wet'suwet'en First Nation laws. If completed, the project would pump 2 billion cubic feet of fracked gas per day from northeastern BC along the Pacific coast. The project manager said they've secured all the proper permits, but the tribe says they don't because they've never gotten permission from the tribes who reside there, violating tribal and Canadian law. A supporting chief confiscated one of their excavators and told the construction workers to leave, which they did. And we'll see if that sticks. A new study looking at tweeted climate stories found that terminology like climate change versus climate crisis versus climate emergency doesn't make all that much of an impact, but climate emergency does seem to imply a sense of credibility and newsworthiness to a story compared to climate change. The subject matter matters more. Climate action stories are received better than climate news. I might have been a bit premature on my COP video to say that no headway is being made with plastic pollution, because global negotiations to combat ocean plastic pollution is set to launch at the UN Environmental Assembly this coming February. It will be interesting to see if they will tackle the root cause of plastic pollution, which is plastic production, because while cleaning up the oceans is good, it's a band-aid solution if you don't stop the flow of plastic. 2 young climate activists disrupted the world's largest coal port to protest Australia's climate inaction, strapping themselves to the coal landing machinery. The Environmental Minister of New South Wales said police should, quote, throw the book at the activists. They were arrested and faced prison time of 7 years. A new study found that warmer soil stores less carbon. This means the warmer and drier it gets, the more carbon the soil will release back into the atmosphere. Coarse texture soils that have less clay lose 3 times as much carbon as fine texture soils that have more clay. Researchers found that this means we should pay more attention to the warming taking place in colder places because they are more likely to experience positive feedback loops from this. Positive feedback loops meaning that climate change is causing something that adds further to the warming and the cycle continues. And finally, Apple announced it is giving its customers the right to repair, finally, with its new self-service repair program. Starting in the beginning of next year, the program will make it easier for people to get spare parts and repair manuals. Only their newest iPhones, which is iPhone 12 and 13, are eligible for this feature. This comes as there's a further push by consumers to be allowed to fix their items instead of buying new ones. The nonprofit advocacy group As You Sow successfully pressured Microsoft to consider the benefits of right to repair, and since then Microsoft plans to act on this idea too by the end of next year. Biden also signed an executive order last July ordering the Federal Trade Commission to require companies to allow independent repairers for their products and root out illegal repair restrictions. Right to repair is more well utilized in Europe. And I am so excited being in California, being able to fix things. What a luxury. And that was the news from November 7th to 20th. This recap is quite a bit late because, the infrastructure bill and COP26 needed my attention, and, Thanksgiving, there's been a lot. But I will have the climate recap for what happened last week and this week at the end of this week. So be sure to check back for that. Before I go, I just want to tell you that there's some links in the resources section which talks about how companies can provide carbon-free energy every second of every day to their customers, which is a growing trend. Companies like Google and Microsoft are working on making this a reality, and there's just been a lot of articles recently that have come out talking about that topic, so it might make for a good future video too. Please let me know which news story you found the most interesting in the comment section below. And until next time, remember to talk about the climate crisis every single day and to support your local news organizations. A big thank you to the people on my Patreon who helped me pay for the equipment and the many news subscriptions that make these recaps possible. A special shout out to my climate confident and courageous patrons, David H., FK, Norman Anal, and Greg H. I greatly appreciate your support. And thank you again to Earth Hero for sponsoring this video. And make sure to check out their information in the description section below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.